Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. Council is conducting this meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council meetings can take place in person as long as physical distancing of 2 meters can be maintained between participants. At this time, according to Alberta Health, public attendance at council meetings should be facilitated through virtual means. If you've submitted a comment request, the chair will call on you with comments and concerns from the public relating to a particular topic. And at this time, phone lines will be unmuted. If you would like to speak, please state your name. We ask that only one member of the public speak at a time. All persons will be allotted 10 minutes to speak as per our procedural bylaw. We ask that if the meeting recesses, that any callers hang up and call back in as the meeting reconvenes. This helps with call quality. Please note this call is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. Everyone has a right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of this meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per the Municipal Government Act, Section 198. We thank you for your cooperation and understanding. Due to the hybrid nature of the meeting, we will conduct a roll call. Reeve Link is present. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Present.
Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Councillor Bigger. Present. Councillor Eichert.
Present.
Councillor Kester.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
You betcha.
Additionally, our voting procedure will be modified. I will call for any councillor who is opposed to a motion to indicate verbally. For any motions with expressed opposition, we will conduct a roll call vote. We have an agenda before us. Does anybody have any additions or changes?
I have an addition I'd like to add under Reeve's attendance, 2 virtual meetings.
And Brian from administration, I have a piece of correspondence I'd like to add for discussion. It's from the Wheatland Regional Corporation, and it was emailed out to council this morning at 7:45.
And under transportation, when Mike is in here, there's some discussion around an issue out in my area on Raymond Hill. I'll speak to it.
Any other additions or changes? A motion to approve the agenda.
I'll approve it as amended.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. 1.31, Wheatland County Council minutes from March 23rd. Any errors or omissions?
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Councillor Kester has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 2.21. Follow up from Resolution 2021-0360, Wheatland Housing Management Body.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from administration. On Thursday, we did circulate out a letter to be drafted to the WHMB. It was circulated at, sorry, I'm just trying to find it. It would have been circulated on Thursday afternoon with from Margaret. Does Council have a copy of the letter by any chance?
You betcha.
Who sent it? Oh, from Margaret.
Okay.
It was Margaret,
so kind of
Thursday at 4:18 under the supplemental documents package.
And we have a paper copy as well.
Yeah, and there's a paper copy.
Okay. So kind of just the administration's thought process on this one is that what I did was I just went back and just reviewed that video from the last council meeting and kind of just summarized council's thoughts and really just put it into a letter to be sent over to the WHMB board. If there is any omissions or if I didn't capture the discussion, please.
I guess I just have one question. What's council hope to gain by this? Is it just, I need some clarification for when it goes.
I think the only thing that I was thinking is just alignment with the provincial regulations and the Housing Act. So just to ensure that where we have representatives sitting, that the legislation on boards or committees that they sit under, that the practices are aligned with that legislation.
So in what way aren't they aligned?
I don't know if any of the housing board representatives want to speak to that, but from my understanding is that currently the requisitioning is not being done to cover a deficit, which is, as I understand it, how the legislation is written. And as I referenced before, I don't want to get into the administrative, I want to stay in our lane. So I'm not necessarily proposing a solution to it, just I think what our discussion previously was that we would direct this. I think administration initially had inquired and there was confirmation that it's not being done as it is written in the legislation. And so this was just a way to more formally ensure that that legislation is that the practice is aligned with the legislation. And just for context, this came from, I've heard from colleagues provincially, and we saw a resolution come to the floor at our fall convention from Greenview. It was defeated, but it was when I was reading that and looking at some of the background material around it, where they had indicated that there are really requisitioning as per the legislation under Alberta Seniors and Housing. And so then it was just through my reading to ensure that we were complying, and just as I had referenced at our last meeting, hearing concerns that there is consideration by the province to look for areas of efficiency or streamlining of housing boards. I recognize that we already have a regional housing board, and it sounds like there's been some perhaps verbal confirmation that we're not at risk of that. But I think anytime we are aware that we could be doing something better or that we're not compliant, for me, I think it's just best practice to try and move towards compliance where possible. And I'm not trying to interfere with operations, and absolutely recognizing the incredible service that the Housing Board and that the Lodge provide to our seniors and through social housing for our community. And please, if anybody...
If I take you at your word, then you would prefer that the Housing Board go into a debt and then requisition the debt the following year, knowing that the debt would be what the requisition was this year. We have audited financial statements that were pretty close to being in a net neutral position outside of grants that we received, which is the case most years. Is that what you want to see with the extra costs incurred? I just want to know when I'm quizzed at the Housing Board, or so the board members know what's exactly being asked here. The Act also says we can requisition for reserves. Maybe we need an operating reserve instead of the requisition just going into the budget. That would be a reserve, and we would draw down the reserve. I don't know what the board's going to say.
Yeah, I think there's
but I don't
different
want this to...
ways to approach it. I'm not a finance expert by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. I don't want to get into the operations of it. My concern is just that, and it's so we do have that relationship directly with the housing board, and then we obviously have representatives that sit on the housing board, and I've sat on the housing board. I just really, for me, fundamentally, it just comes down to when there's an awareness that we could do something more in alignment with the legislation. I think that we should be striving to do that. I don't want to get into sort of the administrative ways of doing it. I know we have some really strong members of our team in finance that may have some ideas of how to do it. If it's wanted for assistance around that, but I don't feel competent to speak to that for sure. And I'm also not in any way suggesting that our housing board, like the Wheatland Housing Board, is the only housing board that necessarily hasn't been in compliance. My understanding is this is an issue amongst multiple housing boards, and I think that's why Greenview brought that resolution forward. I think it was defeated because I'm not sure that it was really fully understood, the intention behind the resolution, but that was certainly what raised just my inquiry into, are we aligned, because the resolution was really pointing to that multiple housing boards are not.
My interest in this is, are we in, like, after reading the Housing Act and that kind of stuff, there's a lot of stuff there that is at the very least open to interpretation. I do not want to be in the position that we are doing something that we've been doing for 20 years to find out we've been actually doing it, and I don't doing it incorrectly. And I want to be in compliance with what the provincial government wants us to do. I don't know if we can approach the provincial government and say, what does this mean? I don't think they're going to give it as their want not to point themselves into a corner. But if you read what the Housing Act says and it doesn't seem to me that the way we're doing it is correct. I just want it to be correct all these years. So I don't know if we can approach the seniors and whoever wrote this book, because these acts are, they're not very well written, to be totally honest. Though I'm interested only for the clarification to make sure that we're on the right track.
Well, and I think when I reviewed the regulation as well, there is some personal onus on our councillors who are board members as well. So I think it's prudent as a council to ensure that if we're assigning duties for board members to sit on a board, that if we're aware that there could be a potential compliance issue, that we're ensuring that things are in compliance. I don't sit on the housing board, so I don't want to be micromanaging how this is done. I don't even necessarily think board members necessarily do. I do know, and CAO Henderson may be able to speak to this better, but we have some really strong, we have an extremely strong finance team here, and there may be somebody that could, if wanted, and again, I don't want to impose anything from the county. It's an autonomous board-run organization, as it should be, and I fully respect that and I appreciate that. But there might be an opportunity, just like on other boards, where if there's some expertise here that we could draw on, if our administration has the capacity, that could be shared and to assist in the process to come into alignment. And absolutely recognizing that there is provision for reserves. I believe the reserves are around repair and maintenance, but I don't have any of my information with me, and I haven't reviewed it recently. So
we can requisition for reserves. Is that what you're saying? Like, I don't understand this totally, and it just to me sounds like it's a timing issue. Like, we don't have an approved budget. They just came out with their financials. Like,
the timing can make it challenging. This is going off memory, and my apologies. I've had so much I've been reading lately. My actual part about requisitions. That have assigned municipalities to housing boards. So I know Councillor Armstrong had a question previously around, because we have seniors that go to other lodges as well. And the way I rationalize that in my mind is if I understand it correctly, the province kind of split municipalities into housing boards. And so we are in Wheatland with the villages and with the town. And so they have the power to requisition those 5 municipalities that are that are represented on the housing board. They can requisition for, and I may not get all the language around this correct, but the operational losses of the previous year for providing housing to seniors in the lodge. Then there's also provision to requisition for a reserve because they recognize that it's important to maintain and repair, and that wouldn't necessarily, as we've seen, like it is an aging building. It's really well maintained, but it is an aging building, so an unexpected expense could come up. So you want to have an established reserve where you can replace a roof. Tom would know way better than I would, but there could be substantial expenses, boilers, or I think Councillor Kester referenced the boiler. A roof I could think of, like we had damage to our fourth roof last week. So obviously, like you need, and that power is within the Act as well. So it's more just and I don't know enough about bookkeeping, but to me, it's an accounting issue of needing to requisition off of the actual loss or the deficit from the previous year.
Chair Link, if Brian from administration, if I may just add some general context and information.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is great. This is great discussion that council is having. So I think kind of what I would advise is that council, if there is any additional questions that council may have regarding this, because realistically everything that is being discussed is just literally outlined in the 3 questions that I put forward. And to me, I would leave it with the experts to kind of get back to us on exactly what it is. And to me, this is definitely just an educational item. Like we're just trying to learn. We're trying to just ensure that we're trying to following the correct processes, following the legislation. So I think it's fairly well clearly outlined in these 3 questions. So maybe the board can just take these questions. If the board does have questions too, it is right in the body of the letter just to get back to us, and we can definitely clarify if there is any other questions. So my thought being that if there was any additional questions or if I missed any pieces in those 3 questions, to maybe modify the letter to ask an additional question or just send as is. Thank you.
Yeah, and that I completely agree with you, CAO Henderson, and it's really not our purview to try and operationalize this. Like that's really up to the housing board as an autonomous organization. So
Yeah, for myself, I'll just pulling up the Act here and looking at the requisitions and everything. I mean, it's fair. These questions are very fair, I believe, looking at what's here. Just making sure that how many different things, 6 or 7 different things, making sure we're following those.
yeah, and then just for anyone's interest, or if you're interested in sitting in the housing board in the future, the other piece of legislation that I reviewed was the Alberta Housing Regulation. And just trying to see where it speaks to. Is there any feedback on the letter? I think administration did an excellent job. I think I appreciate that there is thanks in there because we really do want to express gratitude. The Lodge and the Housing Board has done an exemplary job of leading and serving our seniors through the pandemic, and historically has done an incredible job of just really creating a home-like atmosphere for our seniors and making a place for people to age in our community and close to family and close to their homes. So
I just have one comment before we vote. Being that this is recorded and we have ratepayers that regularly listen to these council meetings, I want to make it clear that the Housing Board, we have a regional supervisor. They're always coming and in direct contact with management, making sure we are compliant. We have different audits that come and look at our operations. We also send our audited financial statements to the ministry for approval. And yeah, if there was any issues on the way Wheatland Lodge is conducting business, I'm sure they would have highlighted it. So I'm thinking in the future, when the board receives this letter, we will probably be asking Shahid, our regional supervisor, for comments, and he can direct it off to the Minister of Seniors. But last I've heard, we are rated very high in the province for the lodge we are maintaining and running. And there was some letter went out, and this is the second time this letter has gone out since I've been on the board, about regional collaboration. Maybe we can amalgamate some boards to save some costs. None of those comments were directed to Wheatland Lodge. When we looked it up, we're fully capable of standing by ourselves, and there is really nothing around that we would amalgamate with. We are a fair-sized management body. So I just want that out there on the recording. I don't need any comment over, but I think it's due for clarification that people listening to this got a little bit of more content. Thank you.
Yeah, and excellent comments, Councillor Kester. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And just a correction, I gave the wrong name of the regulation. The regulation that I had reviewed in reference to the lodge was Management Body Operation and Administration Regulation. And that's where, and what that just speaks to, it doesn't speak to the requisitioning, but it speaks to expenditures, limits on reserve funds, and it's that regulation that speaks to board responsibility for expenditures and liability. Any other questions regarding the letter that administration has drafted? If there's no other discussion, council's wishes.
I'll move that we approve the letter that goes to the Wheatland Housing Management Board.
Any questions or discussion? Councillor Rigger has moved. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 2.22. That's you, Scott. Scott? That's you.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. I have two on virtual Reeve attendance. Normally these are done during RMA. Monday, March 24th for Growth Management Board Rural Caucus.
Just Mayors and Reeves meeting.
Mayors and Reeves meeting, sorry, on March 15th.
And then I did have a question for council. So the Growth Management Board Rural Caucus, I think, is going to be really important until the minister makes a final decision about our inclusion in the CMRB. I was wondering if council would consider putting it as a standing committee for the Reeve, just because we may have, typically we only do that meeting at the spring and fall convention. They are talking about increasing the meetings to perhaps quarterly or kind of at the discretion of whoever's hosting. We're trying to strategize on how best to advocate to the minister for meaningful change to the growth management boards, both in the Edmonton region and the Calgary region. We've been discussing setting up some different meetings with ministers and that type of thing, just to try and particularly consideration of things around voting structure and things like that that are really impacting the work on both growth boards. So just a request for council to consider, and I'm also fine to do this just under my Reeve responsibilities as well. I'm fine either way, so.
Through the chair, it would make more sense to make Scott's motion, just put a motion to that effect, retroactive to January 1st.
You could do that. I'm honestly
Otherwise, you
fine
need
either way.
motions.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to ratify the Reeves attendance at the 2 meetings that I put forward, and also the rural
Growth
management board rural caucus to be added to regular duties. Or what's the wording for that?
Committees.
I think
Committees, yeah, added to committee list. I think the rural caucus boards are invaluable coming forth, working with Calgary and Edmonton, and when you need to lobby a minister, you need to have that backing. We've learned a lot from both. Well, they're a couple years ahead of us up in Edmonton, so what we hear is working, and when you talk to them and find out it's not actually working and what they've learned, it kind of saves a little bit of time too.
any other questions or discussion? Hopefully we won't have to do it very long. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Move to 3.1, Reeves report. It is included in the package. Just a couple of things to note. CMRB did complete our visioning. We did 2 visioning sessions. I believe we actually do have consensus around the foundation of a visioning session or a vision statement. The consultant that they hired was going to take it away and wordsmith it a bit. Community Futures, I just attached an infographic about that Triple RF funding, and it's really quite impressive the impact at a regional level that program is having. So, and it does outline one thing to note for the Wheatland region, and I believe I noted this before, but several of our business owners in Strathmore are actually Wheatland County ratepayers. I'm not sure, I don't know anything about the details of who has accessed these loans, but just to keep in mind that there could be Wheatland County ratepayers that access the Triple RF, and the municipality designation is based on where the business is located, not where the resident lives. So we could have ratepayers being served by that as well. Mayors and Reeves, there is a high level of frustration around some of the intermunicipal collaboration frameworks. It does sound like several will be going to arbitration. And just some frustration around consultation from the province as well was discussed there. I think most people were at the spring convention. I did think that the ministerial forums, there were some really strong questions asked, some good information there. Just to note as well that the resolution that Councillor Armstrong brought forward on extended producer responsibility is being considered by the province, and they have started consultation on that. So I would consider that a good advocacy win in terms of that resolution. I know there's kind of some collateral damage from it right now, but hopefully long term, it will help us deal with some of that, divert from that waste stream into recycling. And so there is, I can't remember if the engagement on that is closed, but the province is doing engagement on that. Some preliminary work just on the new corporate identity. It's going to be a very team-based process, so it's going out to the entire staff team for consultation on kind of thoughts around that, things that they've seen in other designs that work, things that don't. We did have a really good Growth Management Board Rural Caucus meeting. I did ask a clarifying question because at the convention, I thought that I had heard Mayor Shagus from Parkland County, I believe Mayor Rod, say that the Growth Management Board in the Edmonton region provided certainty to developers, is what I thought I had heard at the convention. And Mayor Shagus made it very clear that that was not his intention, if that was what I heard. I wasn't the only one who heard that, is why I had clarified. His position is it creates uncertainty for developers. And there is some diverse views in the Edmonton region, but for the most part, there is a fairly high level of frustration. And so they did respect that we should probably let the Calgary plan be completed. Simply because I can't see the minister making a sweeping change when we're 2 months out from that being finished. And then we are preparing some advocacy work to the minister as well as to other ministers whose ministries may be affected. Minister Schweitzer, we spoke of, Minister Dreeshen. There were some others as well as the rural caucuses for the MLAs, and then also just reaching out to all the MLAs. What some other municipalities are hearing is that MLAs do not have a good understanding of the growth board, what the draft policy in the Calgary region, what the impacts from that can be. And so it's twofold. It's kind of an education and awareness and an advocacy piece, because you have to start with ensuring that they understand what the potential ramifications can be, and then advocating for some meaningful change. There was some discussion around recreation cost sharing and seniors foundation requisitions there as well. And then CAO Henderson and I did meet with Chair Huntley and Superintendent Davern with Golden Hills in response to the letter requesting a meeting with them. We both shared advocacy points. They had an advocacy plan that they shared with us that we can draw on if we are in discussions with Cabinet to lobby for some of the educational priorities for students in our area. As well, they shared a really innovative program that they're piloting in ACME. It's an ACME school, Tri-Campus Community Innovation Care. And it's really about bringing some of that trades programming, rather than doing even the trades programming in the school, they're utilizing local businesses to do it. So they're creating partnerships with businesses. They're already seeing improvements around graduation. They have, I believe, I should have double checked or noted it, I think they have almost 100% of their students come out with having at least one agricultural course in their high school programming. And they're actually finding increased, the students are staying in the community because they're establishing good, sort of good jobs that are sustainable for living in the rural areas, rather than go to the big city for school and never coming back. So I think it could be potentially a very exciting model that could be expanded upon in other rural areas, and it could really contribute to rural sustainability. So it was exciting to hear about that. We did share some of the impacts of our uncollectible oil and gas tax and the impact that that has on education tax, and having that be kind of spread out among other taxpayers in the county, and just some of our concerns long-term with how that is structured. The other conversation, and I'll just highlight it, I did include it in my report, but it's for our WFCSS and SWAT committee members. So the Chair Huntley and Superintendent Davern discussed some of the challenges that they have with coordinating services and minimizing redundancy in some of the programs. And they said that, and because I have served on SWAT for a few years, I recognize this. So SWAT will offer programs to the school board, and the school board would classify what we have offered in the past as universal support. So it might be things like awareness programs or seminars or talks or things like that. And what they stressed, what they really need in the schools is individualized services. So actual things like counseling or therapy, specialized services, could be speech therapy or physio or OT or things like that. And so Brian and I kind of services element of services that Wheeling County provides or contributes to through WFCSS. And so that the appropriate mechanism to have that conversation would be with the WFCSS board and to bring any requests there. They are seeing substantial increases in harms to youth, mental health issues, self-harm, even suicide completion. And we anticipate that that could be even further, like increased post-pandemic as much as it is increased now. So I guess I just share that on their behalf to anticipate that they may be contacting WFCSS and sharing some of those needs with WFCSS. And then if there's ways that we can look at whether there's more efficient ways or ways to reallocate funds just to really serve the students in the most effective way, knowing that we have the WFCSS administration who also is really well informed in how to do that as well. So it's more just a heads up that that request may be coming and some of the context around it. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will move that my report be accepted as presented. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Deputy Reeves' report.
Thank you. My report will be very brief. It's in the package on page 48. The only thing I did not add on here, and I forgot, was the RMA convention, which I did attend and I thought was really good. I did like the format, the virtual format with the ministers. I think it really effective and fast. I think in the future there might be some kind of hybrid thing there, or keep doing it this way, but I find it gets you the information. Get up and walk around a little bit if you have to. Needs maybe a few more breaks here and there. Kind of goes on and on sometimes, but March 16th we had the WRC evening meeting, audited financial statements, and then there's also a letter here that we had talked about the board a few times, and we'll discuss it later, about a loan for overages. Fairfield HOA, which they came here and talked about what we'd already, and we approved that. I move my report as presented. If there's any questions, please ask.
Any questions? Any councillor?
Scott. Yeah, the WRC, the audited financial statements, there was some news over expenses. Do you remember what that was?
There was something was paid twice. I don't remember exactly.
I think in the excess revenue over expenses in the audited financial statement, it was, I believe, if I remember right, help me out, in excess of $38,000.
I'll have to pull that.
And the money was used to pay, and that money was used for paying off loans for sure. They actually made money last year.
I'll have to look it up there. I'm just, top of my head, I can't remember right
Yeah,
now.
I listened to the presentation, but I don't remember it either.
Yeah. I have it in my computer here somewhere. I can get back to you on that.
Do you remember?
No, I do not remember.
Maybe we can.
Oh, I'm
circle
sure I
back.
can find it too.
Maybe we can circle back to that under correspondence when we address the letter.
I can forward all that information to it. It's not a biggie.
Any other questions regarding Deputy Reeve Clausen's report? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Division 1 report.
I have nothing to report. I attended the same council events as everybody else.
Have a good Easter.
Please, no. Do you want a motion to accept no report? Okay. We'll move to Division 3 councillor report. I don't have my mug ready.
So, yeah, everything's there in the report. Update. I don't know if anybody saw the Wild Rose Agritourism initiative. So it came out through Community Futures, and they had some agritourism money. So what they did is they set it up. I think it's a brilliant idea. Is they set it up so that agritourism operators could receive, I think, $20-some thousand towards feasibility study for their product development. And this is something that Canadian Badlands has had issues with, and all tourism, is having enough development out in the east to attract people. So going forward, what they did was they had 5 operators or 6 operators. Actually, they had to pitch. They had to pitch what they were doing, and then it got voted on through engagement, through likes, and they pitched it through social media. And Rosebud Country Inn won. Was that announced yet? I don't know if that was announced yet. It's announced now. Whoops. Anyway, I think it's a brilliant idea how they did it, and it got your operators, the residents and ratepayers knowing what's out there, and great ideas and what they want to do, and how they did it was, I think, great. And so the monies went towards the studies for that. I just wanted to let everybody know that something that they shouldn't have. So other than that, economic development, Speargrass and Carsland conversations are completed, and my understanding is that they did really well through social media. And so we need to carry on with Gleason, Clooney, kind of do the whole circle. And yeah, I'll just move my report as read. I don't do any more damage.
Any questions for Councillor Baker? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to Division 4.
My report is on the server. Everything I think has been pretty well covered. With the only thing I want to make comment on is March 18th we did a next level signage meeting, and I just want to give a kudos to the for staff and administration for undertaking this and doing this in-house. I think we're going to do a wonderful job. I think we're going to hit it out of the park. Now that is a lot of cliches I just threw in there, so I'm pretty proud of we're here. I can't, there's no way I can repeat that. But so anyways, I think they've got the gist of it is we're going to spend money where the money is going to be, like nice signage on the #1 highway so that people know that they're coming into the county, and that kind of stuff. So I really, really want to, I think everybody that can get involved in this thing should get involved in this, because all the input will be good, and we can get rid of our dated signs. So, and with that, I'll move my report.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom, and just super aligned with you. Like, it's one piece to the investment attraction, right? Like, just making people aware, so.
Thank you.
Any Any questions for Councillor Eckert? Any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Move to Division 6.
Yeah, my report's in the package. I will move my report as presented.
Any questions for Councillor Kester?
Glenn, just what was discussed on the at the Red Deer River watershed? Like, where's that? Where's that sort of heading?
Okay. They had a world premiere movie, and they had a panel discussion afterwards. And there's a ASB meeting tomorrow. I forwarded the link on to Russell, and I'm thinking he's going to have a part of the meeting at the ASB. I won't be at the ASB meeting tomorrow. There's an ASHA conference for the next 3 days. I'll be in that. So yeah, it's a nice movie they made, and there's a presentation there, a board presentation, how much you'll get to see. But if you don't get to see it all, I would recommend Russell. I forwarded him the links to it, so he should have all the links, and you should be able to download it on your computer. But I think there's an end date to it, so I wouldn't wait too long. Yeah, just for brevity. Yeah, it's there. It was, yeah, just have to watch and see, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Move to Division 7. Councillor Armstrong?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Checking this. My report's on the website. The only thing that I have extra that's not on there is with SEWA, and at our last board meeting on March the 4th, the motion came forward. It was the last time I reported that we were unsuccessful in the grant for the $14 million to go under the Emissions Reduction Alberta. So at the board meeting, there was a unanimous motion put on the floor for the lead and project lead and the manager to work excuse me, to work with HDR, who's our engineers, on a process for developing an expression of interest for tech vendors along, including costs to do so, action administration to identify budget feasibility, items received for information. That was after that. So we put a motion on the floor to go out to the tech vendors to see if there's any interest, and there is, to see where that's coming back to, or funding to move forward with it outside of the government, and what the government thinks of that when it puts the floor at the next election from the opposition. But anyways, that's where we're at right now. We should know by this fall. Well, that's it. Other than that, that's my report. I'll move it.
Excellent. Any questions for Councillor Armstrong?
No,
Is
not
any-
as good, but it's not as good as alcohol.
I missed what you were saying. Does it need to be? Okay. Sorry.
I would just add that there is some comments. I know I've got ratepayers out there listening to see what's happening, so I'm just going to let them know that the issue around Raymond Hill will come up under our Public Works and discussion, which is a little later on. Okay, but it will be discussed.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Councillor Armstrong? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. I'll just get anyone on the phone line just to mute your phone, just for audio quality. We'll move to 4.11, Chief Administrative Officer Report.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian from Administration. On page 53 is my monthly CAO report for March. On tracker, I'm just working through resolutions. If there are any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for CAO Henderson? If not, a motion to accept his report as information.
So moved.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We can be real quick. We can move to 4.12, Media Relations, Training and Education. Just mindful that we have a 10 o'clock appointment. I guess maybe I'll ask first, does anybody need a break before the 10 o'clock appointment? Okay, we will recess until 10 o'clock. Sorry.
Call recording and transcription are turned off. This call is being recorded. This call is being transcribed.
Good morning. We'll call the meeting back to order. We have a 10 a.m. appointment. You'll have to forgive me. I should know how to pronounce it. Remedex? Is that?
That's Remedex.
Remedex, okay. We have a presentation from Remedex. Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Wonderful, welcome. And just for councils,
thank
we do have the presentation under 2.11. If you can just introduce yourself for the record, please, and please proceed.
Of course. My name is Barry Flett. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Communication Services. I've also got Sonia Kantz on the line, who's our communications lead on this project. First of all, I'd like to thank Council for, again, giving us a bit of a time of day to be able to come speak to this again. A lot of what I'm going to be saying is kind of repeat of what we had before, but I think we come up with a couple of different solutions that maybe will make this a little more attractive for the county and the town of Hussar, and of course for us, because we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't what we think is an economical a boon for ourselves and also for the area as well. So I'll quickly go through some slides here, and a lot of you've seen before, and it's more or less the same diatribe, but in case you forgot, it's been 6 or 8 months since we did our last application, and I think we plan to, if at all possible, probably apply again because we think it's our best option. We have looked at some other sites close by, and that's kind of, our site Bs, so to speak, a little further down the highway. But this is by far the best solution, we think. We think it's the best site by a long shot. A little bit of who we are, which is the second slide, or handout, whatever the case may be. We're an Albertan company who's been in operation for over 25 years. We were purchased by a company called Bosco Environmental about 3 years ago now, and they're one of the largest independent environmental firms in Asia. And they sort of see Remedex and our little base here as a way that they're going to be able to get into the marketplace in North America. So potentially some other opportunities may come up in the future. A little bit of our background. We are basically an environmental remediation company. We've been doing consulting for a number of years, and that really is our background. So we've done sites all over the world, to be honest, and mostly in Western Canada. We've also done some services in the UK and Africa as well, and a number of our staff are environmental professionals, so we don't come at this from just an earth-digging sort of a background. We are professionals, and we have to ensure that we maintain our professional status any projects that we do. So again, what we are proposing a Class 2 industrial landfill approximately 3 kilometers east of Hussar. That picture that there is an overhead of our site at Breton. I'll be referring to that a lot because that's our first and only waste management site that we've got. And that kind of gives us sort of an idea of what we'd be looking at as far as the footprint. You can see, in essence, it's a big bathtub. This design will kind of mirror what we're doing up there. It'll be based on approximately 30 years of service, and with the capability to expand, but I don't think that's in the cards anytime soon. In this current setup, it is to be run for about 30 years, and after that, it'll be 25 years of monitoring. That's required by the regulatory bodies. the end of the day, all the topsoil and all the subsoil is saved. It gets covered over top of the pile, and we will likely put it back to hay. We put it back to hay in the future. So again, what is a Class 2 landfill? It's an engineered containment system where waste material is replaced. It's not like the old school landfills where it was a hole in the ground. This has multiple overlapping measures that ensure containment and protection of the environment. This being a Class 2 industrial landfill, we can only take industrial and oilfield waste. That's it. We can't take any municipal waste, no hazardous materials, no liquids, and limited organics. We might get some wood in there, some sawdust, that sort of thing. Based on, again, our experience at our site in the north, 95% of the material coming in is soil. We also get some concrete and cuttings and that type of thing, but it's mostly soil. So it's relatively benign. And as I mentioned, at closure of the site, we've monitored for 25 years to ensure the site remains safe, and it will go back to a hayfield. The design that we're proposing is what's known as a dry tomb type design. So basically what that does is eliminates moisture going through the material inside of the cell. So that eliminates a lot of what is known as leachate, which can be contaminated, and it's a real issue circulated through the material that gets worse and worse over the years. This is largely eliminated. We have an internal sump in the corner that any precipitation, snow, whatever, will hit the compacted soil inside of the cell and go to the sump. And so the liquid never leaves the site. We think in this particular situation, we wouldn't have to probably do anything. It probably just. So where we're on the planning process, doesn't really make a whole bunch of sense, but that's kind of where we are. We're still obviously in the application approval section. We obviously submitted an application last year, but hoping to be able to do it again. So why Wheatland County? A number of reasons. We think that the area is underserviced. We know for sure there's at least 2,500 contaminated sites in that area, probably more, a whole bunch of them across the number one highway. There's a lot of them over there. The options for remediation for cleaning up these sites is become quite limited, and a lot of it is dictated by transportation purposes. So if you've got a facility someplace close by, that will spur business, that will spur things happening. So if you don't have that, things just don't happen. I mean, I don't think there's been too much remedial and reclamation happen in that area over the last many years. So we hope this would really spur that type of operations and projects. Again, as I mentioned, we are looking at some other sites as our Plan Bs, but this site is such excellent conditions that we really think it's worth trying to see if we can get something done here, because it's the clay and the material out there. It's a very competent thick clay, and it's one of the best we've ever seen. So realistically, we could probably apply with the Alberta Environment Parks without even putting a liner in. But of course, we wouldn't do that. But the material is that competent below that site that we could do that. So we think that where the location is will be sort of out of the way, and I don't think it'll be that visible. I mean, there will be traffic, of course, because trucks need to get in and out of the site. But as far as the site itself, I think we're far enough away we won't be really that visible. Again, this is one of the main slides, is that what's in it for the community itself. We know for a fact, based on our experience in the north, that there's a number of direct and indirect economic spin-offs for the surrounding communities. Just a real rough ballpark, like every dollar that's spent on the disposal side, we know for a fact $2.5 to $3 and probably closer to $5 to $7 is spent on reclamation services. We've seen at our site in the north a real, it's got much busier because we're there. Put it that way. And a lot of people have recognized that by having a facility in that area has spurred a lot of growth and a lot of cleanups in that area. So we think that, obviously there's going to be a source of tax revenue, and we've discussed with the staff, the county staff, probably a host agreement arrangement with Wheatland County. We're still in the early formation of that, but we think it makes sense. That we share the wealth, so to speak. We've made a commitment to the community as much as we can. That could be in grants. It could be even another host agreement as well. And we of course are prepared to be a good neighbor. We had in Hussar, and they asked if possible our equipment could be available for emergencies, that type of thing. And of course, we want to be a good member of the community if we make this fly. So again, with being an environmental consulting firm, we're fairly stern about what happens in the environment. So to maintain our professional standing, we have to ensure that everything on that site will be done correctly. Again, the nature of landfill materials is very low greenhouse gas emissions. We don't think there'll be any odors. Of course, there'll be some when you're bringing something like cuttings or something. It has a mild odor, but even then, it's covered over quite quickly. So we don't think anybody in town or close by will get any odor at all. We don't have any issues with birds because we really don't have organics at the site. And again, the dry tomb design, as I mentioned, effectively keeps all precipitation within the cell, so nothing passes through the waste, and everything stays within the holding sump. If by chance there's a lot of rain down there, we get a lot of precipitation, we would be forced to drain that sump when it gets a certain level, and probably downhole dispose it at a nearby site somewhere. So there's no precipitation outside of the main cell itself that goes into the site. Everything's flowed around it, so no contact with the waste whatsoever. And as I mentioned, all topsoil and subsoil is salvaged, used at closure. And in our discussions with the folks in Hussar, we've kind of come up with the idea that we should probably, we plan to put a wetland area in to be used for the surface water holding area. And we're also talking about putting in some tree breaks as well, because we think that just makes sense. Again, a little bit about our environmental monitoring program. This is not like old school landfill. This is pretty heavy monitoring that needs to be done. This is just a list on the right, kind of some of the things we need to do at our site in the north, and it would mirror very likely what we would have to do at that site as well. And some of the things we have daily truck checks, we have biannual groundwater monitoring, that type of thing. We have to do a yearly report for Alberta Environment. So we absolutely make sure that everything is done to the utmost, because we have to report to the government, and that's checked every year. The site is normal. We have security cameras. I mean, not that anybody's going to steal the dirt, but some of the other design requirements, that's a picture of our site again in the north. So that's kind of what it would look like as it's getting filled up. We need a waste scale house, perimeter fencing. As I mentioned, there's a full groundwater network in place. There's a material testing lab on site. There's site lighting. We don't operate at night, but you still need some lights for the winter and that type of thing. We have full operational safety plans, annual reporting, as I mentioned, to Alberta Environment Parks. We have financial security in place, which is important to recognize that financial security is in place. We can't touch it. If the project happens, it's there in case there was in case our company went broke or whatever the case may be. There's enough money there to close the site, to essentially put it back to what it looked like before, and to monitor for an additional 25 years after that. We've talked about possibly a hydrovac pad in the future, but that's probably not in the cards. It's more trouble than it's worth. We'd have to put in a number of access roads, et cetera, et cetera. As I mentioned, at site closure, this is a picture from the States, but on the right, kind of gives you an idea of what it looked like. It's kind of a tiered, grassed area that will slowly be salvaged as the site gets up to maximum capacity. And you can see in the picture at the bottom that we plan to be 20 meters into the air from ground level at the site. So we did want to, like we've spent the last few weeks talking to people in Hussar and trying to get their feelings and you know, what some of the common myths and some of the issues that they had in like the first pass through, and there's a lot of misinformation and things that get a little bit skewed. We think traffic is obviously going to be an issue. We don't think that that Highway 561 is the best road in the world. My understanding is that it may get repaved, but I think for the most part we'd probably be doing most of our traveling on Highway 56 from the south and from the north. But anyway, there will be traffic. I mean, there are days when we're busy at our site in the north that we get 50, 60 trucks a day. Yesterday at our site, we had 0 trucks. So we average about 10 to 12 trucks a day over the year, and they're usually quite spread out. It's not really that noticeable. Of course, we are committed to, if there's road damage, of course, we would certainly be prepared to aid any issues. Most people are concerned about soil contamination, rightly so. Because, you know, it is a landfill. There's no way around that. The one good thing is, again, it's not hazardous waste. This is mostly hydrocarbon contaminated soil, some salt contaminated soil. That's by far our biggest input into our site thus far. So, and we're very limited what we can take in anyway. So it has to be, in essence, Class 2 materials. It has to meet that criteria. It has to be tested. And all that has to be reported to the government on a yearly basis. Again, the site is so technically strong in so much as the geotechnical conditions, the groundwater conditions are prime. We're so far away from any groundwater source. The clay is so competent. that we don't anticipate there ever would be a problem. I mean, you never say never, but the site conditions combined with the environmental monitoring program pretty much makes it a really safe operation. And specifically, we would have to meet regulations as part of APIA and as part of, which is the Environmental Protection Enhancement Act, which has certain regulations that we would have to meet as far as the design. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think we're going to have an issue with smell. We certainly don't have it at our site in the north. Occasionally, if somebody's doing a diesel invert well or something, you get a whiff of diesel. But honestly, the trucks are coming covered, and the wind would be blowing in probably only from the north and from the west. So I don't think anything would ever come towards the other direction. Rarely. Just as a point of interest, that we haven't had a single complaint at our existing landfill since we opened in 2018. And we have actually been on that site for over 20 years because we did have a sewage treatment facility in place, and it's still there. And we've never had a complaint on the site. So in summary, we do have a fairly experienced project team. We think that the site that we've selected, the one we're speaking of here, is really will have minimal disturbance to the area residents. As I mentioned many times, the geotechnical and hydrologic conditions are exemplary. We can't accept hazardous materials or liquids or any of that type of thing. The overlapping design features will ensure that the environment is sufficiently protected. We think it's a really good market there, or we wouldn't be back taking another kick at the can, so to speak. We firmly believe, and we try to get this point across to the folks in Hussar, that this will be an economic driver for other work in the area. As I mentioned, for every dollar spent at a landfill, there's a lot of dollars have to get spent to get to that point. And, we need services. We will need fuel services. We will need, and being that close to Hussar is a real boon for us, because I know that there's people there. And speaking in our conversations with them, we know that there's some good people there, and it's really valuable for us just to be able to use local people. We think for the most part, the town of Hussar is, I wouldn't say on side. They understand and they recognize the upside. And even our meetings that we had over the last few weeks with town, a lot of people came in very, very negative because, who wants a landfill down the road? But we had good conversations. They listened, and most people left. They might still hate me, but we didn't break into fistfights. It was very good conversations. And we tried to answer the questions as much as we possibly could. And that's something we weren't able to do so much in the first go-around just because of this damn COVID thing. So it's really kind of threw us a bit of a loop. So we're hoping to be a little more proactive on this application. And so, of course, we'll try to be good neighbors. And we really haven't had to complete our facility since opening in 1999. So really, that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to get too much into the weeds. I thought you folks probably have enough stuff going on today, but we are open for questions or comments or anything else that might be on your mind.
So, good morning. Glenn calling, or talking. Yeah. Say, I'm on the page there. I see the height that it's going to be when it's built out on the dirt. Is the majority of this dirt from reclaimed or abandoned oil and gas wells, or where does it would be come from?
We mostly, again, I'm referring to our site in the north, 95% has come from oil and gas sites. We've had a little bit of stuff that's come from what they call industrial sites, but it's dirt. And so we sometimes get concrete in there, like when they're doing, we get some mixed hydrovac waste, but really it's soil. 95% is soil.
So in your experience, mostly in your experience when they're cleaning up these sites, how much dirt do they remove from the site on average? I know some being oil would be more and gas maybe less.
Sites are usually not too bad, but the problem with gas sites is you'll end up getting salt contamination where they have salt spills and that type of thing. So not even necessarily the hydrocarbon side, but more on the salt side. Depending where you're in the province, most of the sites, the really old sites, will have a minimum of 1,000 tons, 1,000 cubic meters in place, either at a pit or a drill pit, but that can vary substantially. And I would say most of the sites that we see coming into our site in the north are probably in the area of around 2,500 tons. some much more, and some less. But that's kind of an average number.
Okay. Would you have an idea how many abandoned sites there are in the county? I know at one time, I don't know, it's hard to get a number of how many sites we had, but I think at one time, a few years ago, I got a number around 14,000 wells in the county, active, inactive.
Yeah, I think you're close with about an hour and a half of the site. There's around that many wells. And our very early marketing guesstimates, we figured at least 2,500 in the area would be requiring remediation and reclamation. And that's probably on the light side. I mean, it is probably close to that 10,000, but it seems insane, but there's a lot of wells out there. And the thing is, each one of these wells, if they're contaminated, they're adding to the overall problems with soil and groundwater. So, I mean, it does expedite cleanup of sites and the surrounding soil and groundwater in the area.
Yeah, so my point is we've got this contamination all through the county.
Yeah.
And if we don't have a place to haul it, it's going to get hauled out anyway. It's much like all our grain terminals are on the edge of the county, but all the grain's growing inside it.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
The trucks they're going anyway, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
True enough,
okay.
But by having something relatively close, like within an hour of where the site might be, that the most expensive portion of remediation projects these days is transportation. So if you're hauling 3 hours to a site or something, it's not going to happen. So by having a site, and we've seen this at our site in the north, by having a site close by, we've got people that are 5 minutes away, and it makes these cleanups really, really economical for them. And it does spur, with a site in the middle, so to speak, it spurs a lot of activity around that area.
I'm going to interject. I just have a question to administration for advice. I know council is always happy to hear from potential developers, but there's a fine line. I'm just trying to sort out in my mind processes around public hearings. If we could just be advised on what's the best way, because my hope would be if an application comes forward that the majority of our conversation around the development could happen in the public hearing so that members of the public or adjacent landowners who might have an interest or may be affected could also hear that conversation. Is there any direction on, I'm fine to accept this as information. We have, I hope we have many more developers coming forward in the future with presentations to council or just for public awareness. If you can just guide me on if we should be limiting questions or discussion today, does administration have any advice?
Good question, Reeve Link. Matt from administration. So what we have here is this is part of, as I understand it, Remedix's public consultation campaign, in which case they've presented this to the Villages Council, and they have distributed literature with this information, probably distilled in pamphlets, as I understand it. So the information presented is for feedback. So you can ask questions. I would recommend specific to the presentation, maybe just some clarification, but I certainly would limit it. We haven't seen an application yet. This in no way, from a planning and development perspective, represents the application that's come in, because we haven't had one yet. So can't comment on any of that, but certainly I would just kind of limit to any questions for clarification on this, but definitely limited.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Through the through the chair, this is Ben Armstrong, councillor for Division 7, where this project is going. Some clarifications, that's what I was stationed. I've been in contact. Some of the ratepayers in that area have contacted me, and some of them were a little bit upset with some of the comments made by some of the presenters as to what went on at the last public hearing, and they weren't complimentary comments to staff and council. So I would just suggest that you be wary of how you make your presentations, because the people do talk to us, so we do understand. And the ones that, if there was derogatory remarks made, we know who made them, and we've been told. I'm not going to tell you who told us, but they've been made. The other clarification there was some comments made to myself and Rink Leave, and I'm Reeve Link, and I'm not sure if any of the other councillors, but the use of our logo without our permission and the assumption by the public that because of that we were all in favor of what was going on out there. So we had to do some backpedaling on that and explaining what happened there, and I know the staff did talk to you about that. Those two issues. The other one, you keep commenting on Brant, the one landfill you have up there. And this one, you say you keep using that as your example. This one you're bringing in as a Class 2 industrial waste landfill, and you talk about oil and gas producers and industrial customers. The one at Branton is presented as a second Class 2 non-hazardous oil-filled solid waste landfill, and it's referred to, I think it's either 4 or 5 times within the application that's what it's used for. There's absolutely no discussion in that application about industrial use. And you run back and forth in your presentation document that I'm looking at here from oil and gas producers and industrial customers, and you take in solid industrial and oil-filled waste only. So I'm just wondering when you come forward with an application that you make it clear that it is strictly only oil-filled waste and no other.
It's not. It's not oil-filled waste. It's a Class 2 industrial waste landfill application with AEP, and that allows you to take in both oil-field and non-hazardous industrial waste. Now, by making it strictly oil-field, you vastly limit your market. So that's why we went for the Class 2 designation industrial at our site in Breton. We will be doing the same here, because if it's strictly oil and gas type landfill, you vastly limit the potential of the landfill. I absolutely agree with you, and it's proven fact that most of our waste has come from oil and gas at our site up in Breton. But we have some other stuff coming in. We have things that we have sand coming in, and that sort of thing that doesn't necessarily fall under the oil and gas.
So you will be bringing in waste from urban.
We could. It doesn't make any sense to.
Okay.
It makes no sense to. But by limiting our license, it does limit the value of that facility.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or clarifications regarding the presentation?
Just on the hosting agreement, that'll be the only one I'm familiar with is with Thorhill. And is it going to be similar along that lines, that it'll be a sort of a per tonnage kind of operation? Is that
I think so. I think that's the idea. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But I mean, we've had some very preliminary discussions with the staff, and we think track and that sort of thing. And it wouldn't be as complicated as a Thorhill one, because that thing's ridiculous. And they've also got municipal waste involved there as well. So this should be much simpler. But I think something like that is probably the best way forward. Then it's easy. We know how many tons come in, that type of thing. We know a rate and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
And I would suggest we maybe even set up the same type of arrangement with Hussar, maybe, because there's too many pieces of the pie to cut. It's not a huge money making venture these days like it used to be, but I think everybody part of it.
Any other questions or clarification? Just a couple of comments. I also heard concerns similar that Councillor Armstrong heard, and just to reiterate the inappropriateness of utilizing Wheatland County's corporate identity without authorization. And just to be very clear to the public that
for sure, that was a huge mistake. Yeah, that was an error on our part. We apologize.
Just from a personal perspective as well, I think there was some misinterpretation of some comments made at one of the public engagement sessions in the community. I believe there was reference to Reeve Guillon from Razoo County and some discussions that occurred with him, and somebody interpreted that was discussions with myself. And so just so that council understands, I did have a brief conversation with the Mayor of Hazard about this, just indicating that no application had come forward at this point. I did let Mayor Fisher know that council had been in some more high-level conversations around hosting agreements and that type of thing, but that there was no discussion around this particular development. And of course, I would have no position on a development prior to a public hearing and hearing all of the information around the application. So just for clarification around that, because I did get just 2 phone calls just with some concerns around statements that were made that were misattributed to myself, or conversations that were misattributed to myself. So the Reeve that was referenced was not myself. So just so that that's clear. Any other questions? If not, a motion to accept the presentation for information.
So moved.
Councillor Wilson has moved. Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. And thank you to Mr. Flood and Ms. Kant for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
We'll move to 4.1.2. There's some options regarding media relations training and education. There's several proposals, and there was some further information just in the supplementary package that was available after the completion of the agenda package.
Yes, Council, Brian from administration. So we sent over some options, some more detail on that on Thursday at 4:18. And this is just a follow-up to Council Motion 2021-03-88. If there are any questions or if Council would like to partake in these, please let us know and we can sign you up. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So there were some options for some group training. There's also the option, I believe it was through, let me just make sure I get the right firm. One on April 14th, JGR Communications through Alberta Council is hosting kind of an introductory training on April 14th, and then they could do further training to what they'll be presenting in that shorter session. I did participate in training from MD Bruce and Associates. It was in conjunction with the town of Strathmore, and I'm trying to think if there was other municipalities there. Not sure. It was in the town of Strathmore. It was Crisis Communications that MD Bruce and Associates put on. It was excellent training. It was really, really good. There was lots of theory and teaching, and then as well opportunities. We had to do like 2 staged filmed interviews, and then they were critiqued, things like that. So very challenging. Like it was good to have that hands-on experience of sort of a situational modeling and then having to respond. So it was mainly communications specialists from the municipalities, and then myself. There was emergency management staff as well. We had peace officers there. I think some was former staff, so this was a little while ago. But she was, I haven't had training from the others, although I believe some have presented at conferences historically, but I haven't had specific training from any of them, so. And I only offer that, so, because I have that experience with her, so. Council's wishes.
It's a good idea, Amber. I'm thinking this would be something we should look into for after the election. And I believe in order to cut costs, it could be shared with Strathmore and the villages and do a session part of partnership meeting. We're only, half a year to the election, and we're getting maybe a new council, be some new anyways, for sure. And I'm thinking instead of having something now and then something in a half year as part of the councilor training package, we have to offer some training. Maybe this can be part of the training, but I'm thinking that would make better bang for a buck to wait for the new council.
Yeah, and we can definitely do this. I think administration brought it forward based on conversation at our last council meeting, just regarding when we were discussing the code of conduct. And I believe that day there was some conversation about offering it to current council as well prior to the election. But if keep this information for after the election, or we can consider it now. Obviously, council's direction.
I'm just thinking value for what you're getting. And yeah, with being so close to an election, that you could be training somebody that is not going to be back. So what's the point? Right? That's, we all based on elections, whether we're here or not. So for the county residents, if we're going to do this, I think we should do it after the election.
Through the chair, I agree with Scott, and I think it should be done fairly soon after the election, not 6 months later. Right part of their training program as soon as the election.
Integrated into the orientation.
Because some of them come in with a different idea, and it's nice for them to have something, because the media does take advantage of it.
I'll move that we accept the options for media relations for general training and education as information.
Any further discussion?
Through the chair, just a friendly amendment, if you would not only accept it as information, but have staff set up something for November, December.
Yeah, there is a responsibility under the MJ to offer training to following the election, so perhaps it could be integrated into that. Okay. Any further discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.2.1, Corporate and Financial Services.
Reeve Lincoln Council, Tracy from Administration. A few highlights from the report to Council. Planning is occurring for the compulsory general assessment reinspection cycle within range 26, including Carsland, Cheadle, and Layalta. The residential request for information forms have been mailed to all properties with a deadline of May 31st. The Composite Assessment Review Board will hear a complaint today till Friday and possibly the afternoon of April 12th and 19th. Our financial analyst, Joel, will be departing from the county. He's moving to another province and has accepted a manager role. We wish him well and we will miss him. We are currently advertising this position as well. The vehicle inspection forms, web and mobile applications have been soft released and are being piloted by the gravel crew and also adopted by the new fleet coordinator. We're hearing very positive comments about that. Development is almost complete for an engagement application called Realtor Connect on Infinite WC website. Starlink Internet has arrived at the county administration building and will be tested internally and may be used as a backup for the county. The Strychnine request form was in production March 15th, and I'm hearing from staff that this has created efficiencies and made the process much smoother. We have the 2021 road band map completed, And lastly, we said we'd get back to council on this. Canada Post will be transitioning mail delivery to the rural addressing system using the blue sign starting April 29th. Mail will continue to be delivered to the same physical destination as it is now. If that destination changes in the future, Canada Post will communicate that to residents. Residents will have up to 1 year from that time to transition their mail to the new address, including their land title. Canada Post will be accepting mail coming from both addresses until then. And those are my highlights of the report. Any questions?
Any questions for corporate and financial services?
Just on the blue signage, which ones are we replacing? The ones that are facing north-south or east-west? Can't read mine
It got
anymore. Just happened.
expanded, I think.
Just amazed at how badly mine has faded in the last 6 months, and I can't read mine anymore. And it's, you know.
So there's a provision for individuals to contact the department, send photo evidence, and they will replace it for you, is my understanding.
Yes, and we do have them ordered in and ready, so it's just for seasonal staff to start that project.
I seem to recall, wasn't it west facing we were going to do?
I
And then I
believe
believe
so.
they added some that were south exposure
Yeah.
because they're, do I remember that? Or was it south first? And we added some west.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought it was south.
They expanded it from what the initial proposal was because it was a bigger issue than originally.
I can get back to council. And I believe I could also ask a friend to help.
That's correct. That's when we brought the blue faded signs, the rural sign campaign forward. Yeah. It's so if you were to, a case would actually be, in fact, the sign when you're driving into the county, that's been replaced, but it is perpendicular, it's parallel to the road. So it's both north and south, and that was completely faded. So that's been replaced. So those ones are first, and then they're rolling it out, Corp and Fin.
There is an opportunity though, so if anybody has contact from ratepayers, because there are issues in areas too as well where it's not the ones that were identified. So there's, might have been in the report or I read it somewhere just recently, you can just contact the county, provide evidence of your sign, and it will be
That's
replaced.
correct.
So there's a mechanism.
Thank you.
Just two.
Question about the mailboxes.
Oh, just 1 second, Councillor Kester. Deputy Reeve Clausen was speaking.
Sorry, was up at his place, and it's amazingly fast and works pretty simple. You just put the dish on the ground and it automatically tracks. I was watching it work. It's really, really fast.
Okay, we'll be putting the dish up on the,
Well, if it doesn't work here, I'll take it.
I already asked, they wouldn't let me.
you'll test it for us.
I think it would be
It
great
heats
for all
and
council
melts
to have
snow
one.
as well. Like,
Yeah.
we've been following feedback from, there's actually like several colleagues in Alberta. Reeve Beatty from Mountain View is using it now. Mayor Nachi from Sturgeon County is using it like personally and getting great results. And then Kevin and I follow this page that people post their results, and we've seen up to 1G service. So
That's amazing. And then, with the rural mail change, there is people that have to already move their locations. I've had myself as one included, and then I've heard from some ratepayers that that was their biggest concern was they like that the mail's changed to a new address that says Wheatland County, but they have to go to a different mailbox, and they were asking me why, and I said that's not my problem. I'm not the person to ask.
Yeah,
So I talked Canada Post, but
it is a Canada Post initiative,
Yeah.
and so we have been speaking to Canada Post, and as we get information, we do post it on our website.
I realize that. I
But-
just wanted to give you that
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Thanks.
Interesting to see the way Canada Post works. It's a big corporation. Even though I don't move my mailbox, I have to move the location of my mailbox. That doesn't seem to make any sense, but somewhere in Ottawa, that makes sense. So that's Canada Post is easier.
Councillor Kester, you had a question?
Yeah, it's going to be all the mailboxes. I know, I'll just say Rosebud has community mailboxes, and they're addressing, I don't know if the county's got it totally. I'm hearing not totally addresses done because there's some of the residents were having 2 addresses, but they still get the mail at the same place. I was wondering, is there any Canada Post can be looking at the hamlets too? I guess a short question.
I think that would be necessary for the ratepayers to contact Canada Post. This update is just specifically in reference to, I believe it was just under 2,000 ratepayers. You knew the number, 1,800 or 1,900 people. And they would have received information from Canada Post. We were affected. We just got a letter with our new address and the new box for our address, and then there's information outlining how to update your addressing and that type of thing. If there's interface issues, I think with our addressing, absolutely contact administration. So if there's something that needs to be clarified around hamlet addressing with street signs, if it's Canada Post, I think we need to direct people to Canada Post, if that's
correct.
Appropriate. I'll also just recognize if there's councillors who go above and beyond for their community to help solve a local issue, then I will commend them for that as well. So even if sometimes as community leaders, we go above and beyond in some ways. Don't have my mug, not engaging. Any other questions for corporate and financial services? I would echo the thanks to Joel Chasson, if I'm saying that right, the financial analyst. We've seen things come a long way in our finance and corporate services department over the years. I know even before my time there was a lot of progress made, and a huge thanks to the team and to Joel for his work as well, and we wish him the best on his future endeavors. Any other questions? A motion to accept the corporate and financial services report for information.
So moved.
Deputy Reeve Clausen has moved. Any discussion? Any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.22, final operating and capital budgets.
Good morning, Reeve Lincoln Council. My name is Matthew Kersiva, Manager of Financial Services. I'm here to present item 4.2.2. Item 4.2.2, final operating and capital budget, can be found on page 68 through 96 of your agenda. At the last council meeting, administration reviewed changes made to the budget since the interim operating and capital budget were approved on December 15th, 2020. Decisions were not required from council as changes were change in estimate to actuals. At the March 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of council, the following resolution was made. That council approve the amendments made to the approved December 15th, 2020 interim budget and include these amendments in the 2021 final operating and capital budget that will be presented for approval at the April 6th, 2021 regular meeting of council. The tax rate bylaw will be brought to a special meeting of council for approval at 8:30 a.m. in council chambers on Tuesday, April 13th. Administration is recommending that council approve the final 2021 to 2023 operating budget and the final 2021 to 2025 capital budget. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Any questions from council? Council's wishes.
I'll move it as information.
We actually are looking for a motion to approve the final operating and capital
Sorry,
budgets.
I'll approve the final operating.
So the motion would read that council approve the final 2021 to 2023 operating budget and the final 2021 to 2025 capital budget.
That's exactly right, word for word. Thank you.
Give a nice tone.
Any questions or discussion? So just to reiterate, this is just the culmination of a long and thorough process. So even though there's not a ton of discussion right now, there has been months of ongoing discussion and iterations and adaptations. And
Just through the chair, just a comment to staff through the reads. The way you're presenting the budgets now are very easy to understand, very easy to go through, very easy to look back on. So thank you for that. I've been here a while, in a few years, there were some years where I'm telling you, it was thrown out the bloody window because I couldn't understand what they were doing. But, so thank you for that.
Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. And we are always open to making further improvements. And so just contact administration if you have any other recommendations as well.
Yeah, I would echo that, Councillor Armstrong. The documents and the process I think that we engaged in, it was thorough enough that I think everybody feels like there was full awareness of what was in the budget, transparency, very considered decisions being made, some difficult decisions, but a very thorough process. And I think we can all, I think on behalf of council, I can echo that and thank administration for the work that was done, both in terms of the documents and the process. So thank you.
I'll pass that along to our team.
You're here. Any other discussion regarding the budgets? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.23, broadband update.
Good morning, Reeve Lincoln Council. My name is Amanda Garner, and I'm the project consultant with Tricon Solutions for the Wheatland County Strategic Broadband Initiative. The broadband project update starts on page 97 in the agenda. I'm looking to have this report to be passed as information. At the top of the report, you will see the project timeline in green. It has been updated to reflect the current status of this report as of this report's submission date. The project is progressing on schedule and on budget through the current future state and asset mapping phase of the project. We are approximately 2/3 complete in this phase and plan to be heading into the RFP phase as scheduled in early June. As part of the project analysis, the team has reached out to broadband vendors within the county to initiate an introduction and to understand the vendors' current and future broadband plans for Wheatland County. Updated asset maps have been formally requested for most vendors for use in assisting the county in compiling a consolidated holistic view of the current broadband infrastructure. Additionally, the team has contacted a number of Alberta counties that have or are currently in the process of addressing their broadband infrastructure needs. This knowledge will help the project understand other municipalities' approaches, solutions, lessons learned, and provide additional context as Wheatland County designs its broadband future. Next steps will be the conclusion of the current and future state analysis and the start of the initial writing preparation for the RFP process, which will begin in early June. This completes the broadband project update. Thank you.
Any questions regarding the broadband update? A motion to accept for information.
So moved.
Deputy Reeve Clausen has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.31, Community and Development Services Report.
Good morning, Council. Matt B. from Administration, here to present the March 2021 Community and Development Services Report found on page 103 of your agenda package. Just a couple of highlights to bring your attention to. For Parks and Recreation under Community Services, we did have a couple of council meeting items. We prepared a report for Community in Bloom. So Speargrass so far has submitted to register for this, as council did approve up to $1,000 for entrance fees to allow interested hamlet communities to participate. So that's quite exciting so far. The next quarter plans to bring your attention to the little logo at the bottom of 103, Pitch in Canada. So we're advertising for groups to register for this Pitch in campaign event from April 18th to the 24th. That's a Sunday to a Sunday. So that's what we're doing. And of course, we have a proclamation coming forward for that moving forward. A couple of councillors have spoken to the next level corporate identity. So we had our inaugural meeting with the internal committee, and we're starting that strategy. We're rolling out the campaign. So we've pushed that across the organization. So that's exciting as well to hear feedback from employees all over the corporation. So we're quite excited to see what we come up with moving forward. And after we get all the feedback, we will compile that committee again and move forward from there. a couple of statistics for you to note on page 104 and 105 of your agenda package for fire services. We do hope that we have captured all of those statistics. We're breaking them down in various ways for council's information as well. But to put your attention to the Carsland Fire Hall, we are making progress. We've received some really good feedback with regards to our progress in construction there. So as you can see, just to note, we have a couple of construction change orders. They're quite nominal in nature. So you can see there on page 107 a few of those change orders. Moving forward, prep and pour of the trench drains and apparatus bays and preparation for inside floor slab concrete pour is coming up. So we are on budget. One of the unknowns that I want to point out, but we did budget through professional advice from Fortis, is the utility installation. Until the service applications for utilities are made, the utility companies will not provide pricing, so we did budget through third party. So we feel confident that we will be on budget for that one item there. And then moving forward into planning and development, we have year-to-dates as of February for safety codes, planning and development applications. There's no real differences to highlight in those statistics as well, and we're continuing on with those long-range projects. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Community and Development Services? There's no questions. A motion to accept for information.
Also move.
Councillor Bigger has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.32.
On page 114 of your agenda package is the Pitch In Canada 2021 proclamation. This is just to have a proclamation that April 18th to 24th is Pitch In Canada Week in Wheatland County. Thank you.
Any questions? You can do it any time of the year with a particular focus that week. Council's wishes. I will move that Council proclaims April 18th to 24th, 2021 as Pitch In Canada Week in Wheatland County and invites all citizens in our region to actively participate in Pitch In Week. Open the floor to discussion.
Very fortunate that our 4-H clubs, we have quite a few of them, and they do a great job too.
Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.33.
Yes, Council, Matt from Administration again. On page 118 of your agenda package is some board member appointments for the Economic Development Board. Just as a result of a couple vacancies there and a few applications that we ran through our matrix, the resolution suggests and recommends rather to appoint Marcus Lehman and Larry Chanisick to the Economic Development Board for a 2-year term. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'll move those appointments.
Councillor Armstrong has moved. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.41, Transportation and Agriculture Report.
Morning, Council. Mike's here with Transportation and Ag Department. I'm here with the March Transportation and Ag Report. I see on page 121 the highlights from our department. I'll start with the General Manager. So a few things. We're looking at finalizing our sales agreement. I actually just received confirmation this morning that the receiver has accepted our revisions for this. So hopefully I will bring something to Council next meeting for this is the purchase of the Carsland water license. It's been a work in progress for a while, so it's good to be getting near the end on that. Some other recommendations, we're looking at bringing back an RFD for the cost sharing of the Bridge 11 next month or next meeting. A highlight, we actually brought 23 pieces of equipment. You can see to auction earlier or later last month. The final sales were 3.173 million on that piece of equipment. So right in line with our estimates of 3 to 3.2 on this. So according to the dealer there, we did quite well on this stuff. A lot of the equipment went down, so they are sold and off to their next life. Just some other highlights from the other departments here. The operations, we are bringing back, as of today, the majority of the seasonals have returned to the surfacing and ag and the Hamlet crews back. They'll begin the maintenance. First sites we're going to be hitting are the slide up near Dallam. That is one of our first repair jobs, as well as just the trouble spots that have popped up over the winter. Just some other highlights on that. The gravel crew is currently in Christensen Pit, crushing through there, and then going to be moving to the La Alta stockpile. The utilities crews are actually, as we speak, they're having a kickoff meeting for NIB returning up to the lagoon construction up there at Rosebud. That's great news. They're going to start on here, still with completion to be done later this year, so they're on track for that. That's great. We have on the same vein, we have Parcon returning back for finalizing the lift station up in Rosebud. And Ag Department, same thing. Seasonals are returning today. We'll start with the maintenance and start looking into spraying and that sort of thing coming up. Those are my highlights. Available for any questions.
Any questions for John?
Yeah, Mike?
Yes.
This equipment that was sold, I'm getting a few questions. And I'm thinking it would help me in particular answering them if I could have some sort of a report how old this equipment was and what we bought it for. And then I'll let the ratepayers, and then actually what we sold it for too. And I'm thinking it'll go a long ways to answering some of their questions if we could have a report like that. More or less individualized on the major pieces of the construction equipment, if that would be possible. And also in Rosebud, the lift station. And I know right now we're just Rosebud. All the waste is running through septic tanks, and then the effluent is going to be transported out to the new lagoon, right? So this new lift station, would it be capable of lifting like sewage before it goes through a septic system, like straight out of the house?
So through the chair, yes, the lift station will be capable of lifting raw sewage. The reason we have and we continue for new development there, we have the limitations with the existing system of 3-inch mains through the community. So there is a question as to raw sewage being transported through the community and blockages. That's what you see with any of the new developments we have. We still require that septic tank requirement when they develop.
So with that major new development, still waiting to start construction, 17 lots up there. And I believe it was accepted with a storage tank. Is there any look being done to running the highest part of the hamlet, just running a raw sewage line down to the lift station and starting there with, so to say, the upgrades, and it would take pressure off of that 3-inch line that's already in town? And other places can be hooked on. There would already be a main line there, and we could start on this conversion, because then septic tanks are getting some of them getting quite old, and they're going to have to start being replaced here, I'm thinking, soon. Just looking out for the future.
Through the chair, that is something we can definitely look at. It hasn't been proposed as a solution. Just speaking to that specific instance with the storage tank, that was actually just an interim measure on the chance that the lagoon was not constructed when they wanted to develop. As of right now, that septic tank, or the large communal tank, is actually being removed from the design. They're going back to individual tanks on-site collection system. So the design has been revised from what it was a few years ago on that one.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But maybe a little bit of a study can be going to have you price out the individual septic tanks and going to a main line going to the lift station. Maybe there's some room there to start the switchover. That's all I'm saying. I'm thinking we should look at it now before we haven't dug any holes yet.
No, and definitely through the chair, what I can do is bring back, we have done about a year and a half ago, I think we did an analysis on a gravity system and what that would look like through Rosebud with the different lift stations needed and that sort of thing. So I can bring that back to council and update it just to show current pricing of what we're looking at for that different solution.
Yeah, I remember you showing us that. Basically replacing everything and get rid of the septic tanks and stuff. So basically, it's a whole new system for the whole village, which is a huge expense.
So anything that follows on to administration, anything that, like any kind of, like in the hamlets and all that kind of stuff, that stuff I assume is all under a local improvement tax. Like if we were going to change the way the system is working now, that would be, I can't see it being fair to everybody in the whole county paying for this, so it's a direct benefit for this. So is that the way it works? Like if there's a massive infrastructure build in the hamlet, that falls upon the people in the hamlet that pay for it? Would that be the way it works?
Through the chair, we've done it a few different ways here. Primarily, we look at debenturing back the costs of any of these improvements to the county. We've done 5 or 10%, depending on what the project was in the past. There is the alternative for local improvement tax, or what we've leaned more towards is offsite levies. So you put an offsite levy to each development, incoming development on the property, and if there's any new that are inputting into that system, they have to pay a levy towards upgrades and maintenance of that. So there's a few different options we can look at. Particularly, we've done debentures in the past.
Thank you.
I'm not looking to spend a bunch of money. All I'm looking for is there is a new septic tanks that A, might have a limited lifespan if the rest of the hamlet goes to these lines, and B, if you're spending money on a septic tank, that money maybe could be better spent towards a start of putting in a main line to the lift station, or maybe consideration of where the lift station even goes in the first place. That's all I'm saying, is to plan into the future and prudent use of tomorrow.
So through the chair, maybe, as I say, maybe an option. I can bring back that report that I had done years ago. Maybe after that we can look and discuss. There will be a fair amount of inputs from the county at this, as we've approved them as they sit right now, to put in manholes, to put in sewer mains, to put in likely not lift stations, because it is, like you say, Councillor Kester, the highest point of the community, but there will be some costs that likely the county will have to come up with the services. So I'll bring back the report at the next meeting that we can, and we'll have a discussion about it at that time.
Councillor Kester, maybe just to formalize, do you want to put a motion on the floor for that? And if you'd like a report about the disposition of assets, perhaps a motion for that as well?
I'll move that we staff prepare a summary report of the disposition of the major construction equipment. Would include the year the equipment was bought and the purchase price, net purchase price, and what it was sold for. Make that motion.
Motion on the floor. Any questions or discussion?
If we're going down that road, would it be helpful to have operational costs per year?
Yeah,
That was a factor in our decision too, of the whole construction department.
So you're suggesting just the net impact of the disposition on operations?
Would that be okay to add that, Glenn?
As long as it's clear.
Yeah.
I don't want like one number on the bottom. I want people that are asking these questions are well aware it costs money to operate equipment. They just want to know how much money we lost in the deal. So if you can add it on another line item with lifetime or cost to date of operating that equipment that would include, I guess, fuel, labor, insurance, whatever you include in your package, that would be okay, as long as it's a separate line item.
And I'm not sure, Councillor Kester, I might have missed it. Did you speak to like depreciated value? Because I think that's even more relevant maybe than what purchase price was.
County buys its equipment at a different rate than the general public buys it for. I don't need the depreciated value. If you would want the depreciated value, we can have that, and I would like that to be a separate line item too. I want the purchase price, net purchase price, and the selling price, and what year it was bought. We can include the depreciated value, and we can include the operating value that would include maintenance, labor, fuel, insurance. Those are the bigwies. The rest of it, I think, is
just the operation.
I just wanted a simple report. I didn't need to have pages of it too. So I'm just interested
is only
in the selling price.
Your simpler report's only showing one side of the decision that we made. Show the full report and why we made the decision we made. You have to show the cost savings over the next 5 years from moving from owning our own equipment, operating our own equipment, and moving over to a contracted service. That's the only way you can truly show why we made our decision. If you don't show that, you're just...
It's skewed information. If you're not looking at the impacts to the department overall. I see where Deputy Reeve Clausen and Councillor Wilson are coming from. So if Councillor Kester, if you're open to a friendly amendment just to include sort of the impacts on the future operating costs of the department, I do think it's pertinent to ratepayers who are looking at this. I know I've had this conversation with ratepayers, and I've gotten some really strong support for the decision that we made. It's a difficult decision, but strong support from a fiscal perspective and an efficiency perspective. So I do think it's critical that we provide balanced and complete information if we're providing it, and if we're asking administration to go to. A lot of this was done. We looked at it through our budgeting when we were making these decisions. We had a very fulsome report about each piece of equipment, and so we have been provided this information to a certain extent. So,
as I said, I would move that we would report of the net buying price and the net selling price and the year of the equipment. I also said that you can include the depreciation and operating costs of the equipment too in the motion.
Awesome.
I also said that the majority of the questions I'm getting are from businessmen, and they just want to know the price as an addendum, not included in the motion.
So you won't be accepting a friendly amendment to also have the efficiencies
I think he did say the operational costs,
over
which
the next
would,
few years from switching from our own in-service to contracted? You won't accept that, or you will, Glenn?
so I think Councillor Wilson's just asking for clarity if you're amenable to the idea of what would have been the projected operating costs that we would be saving. And I guess a piece of that too is what we will be spending on contracting but that's in our budget as well, so.
So will you accept that as part of amendment to your motion?
I'm not sure if
Oh,
you're...
sorry, I'm on mute
Yeah,
here.
I was
I'm
just
on
going to
mute.
ask.
Yes, I'll accept that as an amendment.
Okay. And after
You
all
can
that
put on there
round,
that,
does
yeah.
administration have any
I
questions?
guess as long as you include as operating efficiencies, what it cost the county to build a mile of road last year or the year before, and what it costs to contract a mile of road. I know we have them numbers someplace, and that can start off your report on efficiencies and what you protected into the future.
Any questions for clarity from administration?
No, through the chair, I think I have the overall context of what you're looking for here.
I have had questions about this, and I've had conversations also with business operators in the county, and at this point, I haven't had any concerns. I've had really strong support for the rationale for our decision.
Yeah, so have I. I mean, the previous manager of Volker Steven in Gleason he's my uncle, but he was very supportive, so he's got very good experience in that industry, so he was pretty happy with the decision that we made.
I've had a lot of support for it, but I've also had questions against why we did it, so the information is helpful there.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Information's always helpful. Transparency is good. It is always something we aspire for, or aspire to. Any other questions? There's a motion on the floor regarding a report on disposition of major assets. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. And then perhaps just a motion regarding the Rosebud. I think it would just be to bring forward the report that was brought previously, to ensure that it's up to date.
I would like to make a motion that cost projection of upgrading the main sewage lines and 17 there plus or minus new septic tanks being in the new subdivision, and what it would look like to provide a line.
Any questions from council? There's a motion on the floor. Administration have any questions to clarify what's being requested?
Through the chair, no, I don't.
Okay. Any discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Armstrong, you were going to raise Raymond Hill.
Yeah, excuse me, yes. The issue around Raymond Hill has come up a few times. The last time it was here, it was in 2011, and basically the same issues were up around the town of Drumheller, looking at their budget and looking at closure of the Raymond Hill because of slides on it. At that time, the issue was grain hauling down to the grain elevators at Drum, and when I got to apologize to Mike and probably the residents out there that when Mike first approached me about this, that's what we were talking about, was grain delivery down through there. And I thought, well, there's not much grain delivery down there anymore other than what goes through on the highway. And then I started making some phone calls and to some of the residents, and I phoned 8 or 9 of the residents that I know move machinery, or they phoned me, either way, back and forth. And their concern now is the machinery that they're moving and the size of the machinery, and having to move that machinery over onto the 56 highway to get across to labs in Drumheller to have equipment worked on or have equipment delivered. And also the fact that Bizano, my understanding is they're losing their John Deere dealer. So a lot of that equipment that was going south will end up going north again. And some of the residents that I've contacted or contacted me are out in the Duck Lake area, the Dallam area. So it's a big area out there that uses the Raymond Hill to move machinery. Part of the issue with moving machinery down the 56 highway in the last few years, the government has gone to changing their guardrails. And like some of this machinery is 25, 26 feet wide, and I think that highway is only 36 feet wide or something like that. And when they put their new guardrails in, they moved them in on each side. You probably lost 6 feet of pullover space. So when they're going down the highway with that equipment, they're taking up the whole highway. And some of them have reported getting some very angry responses from the public. So they would love to see that hill kept open. There's a slide on it that keeps getting further out on the hill in Drumheller's side of it. We have an arrangement. We made an agreement with them in 2011 for maintenance on that hill for the summer and the winter, for graveling, for snow removal, for keeping the road clear. And we would do the maintenance and send the bill to Drumheller. And we've also got this morning I see, and Mike's got it too, received a petition. They're calling it. It's really not a petition. It doesn't fit the parameters of a petition, but it is a letter of concern. And for the ratepayers, we take letters of concern just as serious as we would if it was a truly a petition, but it doesn't fit the parameters of a petition. But we do take the letter of concern serious, and there's 18 signatures on there. So as staff approached Drumheller with our agreement that was in place in 2011 and talk to them and see if we can still maintain that agreement. That agreement covers both the Raymond Hill and the Wayne Hill, and we are waiting for a response back on the Wayne Hill right now because of the bridge construction on Bridge 11. But if staff would go down and approach the town of Drumheller with their public works and so that they can go back to council, it's a budget issue for them also, and bring back a recommendation back to council as to how we go forward with this and trying to convince the town of Drumheller to keep that road open through this agreement that's in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion on the floor, questions, discussion? No questions? Sitting councillor opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you. And the ratepayers out there, thank you. We'll see what they bring forward.
Excellent. It's a good example of how local government can be nimble and respond.
There was one other thing I was going to mention, and there was a letter from sorry for bringing this up after the motion, but there was a letter from the fire department in Dallam, and in their emergency response for their fire and emergency to issues on the 56 highway on the hill especially, that Raymond Hill is their alternate route when the highway is closed. If that hill is closed, then their alternate routing to get down into the valley over to East Cooley or over to the Wayne side, so it's quite a lengthy detour if they have to use it. This one is just a mile off the 56 and down into the valley. So.
Yep, good point, good information. So we will look for that to come back. Any other questions or discussion on the Transportation and Agriculture Department report? A motion to accept the report as information. Councillor Armstrong has moved. Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move to correspondence. First piece of correspondence is regarding a declaration regarding Seniors Week, June 7th to 13th. Sorry, I was trying to find the dates. Could be
That's illegal.
They out into the parks and let them walk all over the parks for a day.
I just saw the lodge just had a busload of people out. I'm trying to think where they were. I think there was hoodoos. Were there hoodoos? Did you see? You hear?
They went to Hooters?
Hell of a party.
Okay.
Well, they are open.
Oh, hoodoos.
I don't need to be misinterpreted again. I need to enunciate more clearly. Hoodoos. No, they actually, I just saw the activity bus from Wheatland Lodge was just out. They had their Tims and they were out on an adventure. I just saw that. I thought it was awesome.
The reason I say that is that, and this is, the more you get involved with this stuff, the more. I was down visiting my aunt down at Nanton, so I took her out for a walk. She had to go to the dentist, which was fine, so we walked to the dentist, and she wanted to walk around the block. You got to keep your contact with people to a minimum. So of course, you take somebody that's got dementia, you take them outside, you walk them down to the dentist. They know a lot of the people in town. They recognize them. They don't maybe know them all. They've been cooped up for how long? A year? In there, can't get out. So they get out in the spring, they go for a walk, they see people they recognize. What do they want to do? They want to go up and visit with them, talk to them, and speak to them. And you got to say, oh, you can't. You got to stop. You can't get any closer. They're screaming at each other across the street, hollering at each other. You can't even take them out for a leisurely walk around town because of these crazy regulations they've got in place. And all they want to do is get out and talk to each other. So, anyways, that's just me ranting again. So
just a question. Our WFCSS does sometimes participate in Seniors Week. I know it's different because there are public health measures in place. I don't know, Councillor Kester, Councillor Figure, have you guys? Sometimes it's in collaboration with the town.
Like they just did a, where they gave like puzzles and things to do, bags like for pickup. Yeah, they had some Gleason.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's really done on Seniors Week. I don't know if they actually celebrate a week, but that's pretty much all they've done that I know of so far. Because there's not many classes and stuff they can do right now. But they do participate in helping seniors out.
I'll put a motion on the floor that Wheatland County Council declare June 7th to the 13th Seniors Week. And at the very least, we can do the proclamation and recognize the foundation of our municipality and our seniors that have made Wheatland County what it is. And then if WFCSS is doing anything in recognition, it is a provincially recognized week. I think we've had confusion before because a request for a day comes forward as well. Tom will point it out when it comes forward because it will be redundant to this. I will put that motion on the floor and open the floor to questions or discussion.
Yeah. What do you want to do that week?
I'll treat you to something. Not a parade.
That's way too
Okay. I was thinking perhaps a libation, but
maybe Hooters.
And that goes down.
And I rescind my offer. Is any councillor opposed? Let's go through this fast before it deteriorates more. Motion is carried. There is a report from STARS on impact. I did just notice a significant increase in call volume for 2020. We were up from 35 in 2019 in Wheatland County up to 49. And they do lay it out by area, which is really nice. And there was a good map. And that story is of the gentleman that had the heart attack is just very, really speaks to STAR's critical role in the timely treatment for patients where that is a critical factor in their survival. we can probably just include that in an overall request to accept his information. There is also a letter from WFCSS outlining our requisitions. Because it's a requisition, I don't, and CAO Henderson, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we need a resolution for it, but I think we often do pass a resolution. Is that correct?
I think we had been passing resolutions if there was additional top-up funding. This is in the budget, so you can just accept this information. There's no real need for action.
Okay, perfect. And then the last...
I think for clarification...
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
For clarification, FCSS funding is not a requisition. It is voluntary. But having said that, I believe it was a 3-year agreement starting last year that you participate in FCSS. But it's not a requisition. It's a voluntary thing. That's why this comes through every year. But I believe the motion last year should have covered it, being a 3-year funding program model now. Just for
You're right. It's a required municipal contribution, and it's just required in order to access the provincial funds in that 80-20 ratio. So yeah, excellent point. Thank you for the clarification. It's not a requisition, but we have signed a contract which requires us to pay a municipal contribution. So excellent clarification. Thank you.
And so, Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not positive, but I think when we were, the Reeve Link was talking earlier about mental illness in the schools, we doubled that for this year.
Oh, excellent.
The request was doubled, and we accepted it.
Excellent. Would you mind just...
Yeah, and there's also Wheatland Counseling. Used to be the money was spent more on recognition. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Very little operating money, but now the counseling part is there, and that's more individual type needs, I think.
Yeah, outside of the school. Yeah.
We're trying to move. Yeah, for sure.
Just out of curiosity, if one of you could include in your next report, perhaps, how the project funds were allocated. It's purely for curiosity, but it does speak to the impact of WFCSS that it has in the community. So I think that would be great if you wouldn't mind including that as an addendum to your report. The last piece of correspondence, my hope would be that council would support some action on, so we can discuss it. Oh, and there's one more, WRC. We'll deal with municipal affairs first. So everybody probably recalls, as a member of the CMRB, we had received a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs indicating that he was hearing some concerns around rural municipalities in the growth management boards not contributing to rec partners, given that recreation funding is not discussed, has been agreed to not be cost shared at the growth management board. I find that a little bit curious because that is excluded, or there's been some consensus around excluding that, but there has not been any decisions around what will be cost shared. I don't know if Deputy Reeve Clausen can expand on that. He sits on the joint land use and servicing committee, which is where you would anticipate some of those conversations to happen. At this point, they have not. And the only reason I raise that because it goes back to our conversation from the Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting, where the town of Strathmore had presented that they had developed a cost-sharing model sort of independently as a municipality and shared that with our administration. My understanding was that it was not at the point where our administration had even been asked to share it with our council yet, so we had not addressed it. I know our council has discussed some high-level philosophical things around cost-sharing, best practices, those types of things. I'm not sure, and we did outline in our letter to Minister McIver what we have cost-shared on, which has been substantial when you contribute $3 million in capital and a significant amount on a yearly basis towards operations as well. We outlined all of that, so I'm not sure what has given him the impression that he sent this letter, so I'm a little bit concerned. He says he's very concerned to learn that there has been no meaningful progress to resolve this matter between Wheatland County and the town of Strathmore, specifically with request to recreation services. So we do have a current agreement in place where we're cost sharing on the Strathmore Motor Products Sports Centre and have made some substantial contributions historically.
When I read that, I had a thought run through my head, and I got thinking somebody's talking out of school. That to come down from him in a
I think it'd be appropriate to ask what the town sent. What was their response back to the minister to get this? Because what we sent to the minister is public information, right?
That might be a good starting point if we could
So
perhaps direct administration
you don't know what
to
you're going to ask.
You got it from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. This seems very...
maybe start there and then, so perhaps a motion for administration to inquire. I mean, it literally might just be, and I maybe could have done it, but looking at their council packages, if their correspondence that they sent is in there.
It's more than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised when he said no meaningful progress, because we are in a current cost sharing agreement. We have had discussions. We just recently at Wheatland Regional Partnership, I thought, had a meaningful conversation in an appropriate forum. The information that Mayor Fuel was sharing had not been shared with our council, and the methodology around the modeling had not been, I don't think we were consulted in the methodology around the modeling that they were basing some of their assumptions on.
Definitely more talks need to be happening.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
figure out where this is coming from. As far as the CMRB, the recreation has been talked about, but it's been put way off. I mean, there's so much more that they need to do to get to that point that I don't foresee it for a couple of years yet. And of course, it's going to draw, the larger centers are going to draw into that long before we're drawn into it. You know, same argument always made over and over again. With Strathmore, I think, talks need to be had about defining what is recreation, because we have rural recreation. I just sat on with the Ag Society in Strathmore about their idea for recreation, and it has a more, in my opinion, more appropriate to the rural life, and that is under supported in my opinion. So there's some stuff there that we can make some arguments on and support different variants of recreation.
And I think I've heard consensus around this table that it is a sub-regional issue. Like, we recognize that we have recreational facilities that are utilized by recreational users from other municipalities, for infrastructure services that may be utilized by within the CMRB, because they really, from my perspective, much of what's being done at the CMRB is being done on a sub-regional level. If you look at the joint planning areas, which the plan is premised on, that's where the focused growth will be, and they're inherently sub-regional. And a lot of the questions around cost sharing and intermunicipal collaboration needs to happen at a sub-regional level. So we need to have the villages as well included, and we need to have some representatives from some of our hamlet organizations that operate some of our facilities in our municipalities that are utilized by other municipalities as well. So we do have a deadline of August 30th. That gives us some time to get some information and see where we go. So perhaps we want to defer a response to the minister until we have a better plan in place. Did you put a motion on the floor? I didn't write it down.
No, I just think we should reach out to the town and find out what their letter was they sent, so we know what we're up against. I think when we sent our stuff out, they would have got it.
I don't know if we CC'd ours. I'd have to, I do have it actually right here. Sorry, guys.
But I know it's been on the table since we got elected. It's been talked about and
Yeah,
back
we
and
just
forth
copied our
on the burner,
council.
off the burner. I'd like to see something.
By August, whatever that is, maybe we'll be out of the CMRB, and then we can do an ICF and IDP for with Strathmore. So it's all
that may go to something else, arbitration.
Get your glasses on again.
Do you want to put a motion on the floor just so that's, I don't know if you want to direct me to or administration?
Just make a motion, I'll make a motion to get administration to look and see if we can get what letter or what the town sent to the minister through either asking the town office or through research just to see what it is. So we know what they're asking or know what we're up against.
And then I'm trying to, does anybody recall off the top of your head when our next Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting is? Because I know there had been some conversation at our second last one. I had invited, Mayor Fuel had called and expressed that he had thought it would be on the agenda and it wasn't. Right, June 7th. So, and I had invited him to add it to the agenda. I said, we're always open to having that conversation, and I really do think that that is a good place to at least start that conversation. There may be further discussions that need to happen between specific municipalities following that, but I think it's really important that we collaborate, get some consensus around how we're going to approach this, draw on some of those best practices that we're aware of, and go from there. So, any other questions or discussion on Deputy Reeve Clausen's motion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Then it might be prudent just for us to have a discussion and establish sort of a council position on where we are at in terms of how we want to approach cost sharing with all of our municipal neighbors philosophically. And then just the reason I'm saying that is so that we're prepared for that June meeting, because I don't want to make any assumptions about what the council position is. When I responded at the Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting, a lot of it was just that we hadn't seen that information, we hadn't been consulted on it, and on where we're going. I think I have heard consensus around basing what we're doing on best practices. What we were doing historically really was not best practice, where you're just transferring revenue with no governance over how those funds are being stewarded. I don't know if we need a motion to the committee of the whole discussion, perhaps at some point before June, if we have an opportunity.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to figure out where we're direction forward and negotiate from there. So I can make that motion to put it at next committee of the whole meeting, discussion on recreation, funding for all municipal partners.
If you wouldn't mind, even just friendly amendment to expand it to like sub-regional infrastructure and servicing cost sharing or something.
That's fine.
Just to me, it doesn't make sense to isolate one service and completely, and after discussion, it might be that that is the one we need to focus on. I'm not suggesting that, but to me, it would make sense to start here and then drill down what do we need to actually look at? What are the services or infrastructure that ratepayers are utilizing, and what's the best approach? So if you're open to that.
That's fine. I'll accept that.
Any questions or discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. We had an addition to the agenda regarding the Wheatland Regional Corporation. A request, it's been circulated.
Yeah, I can speak to this. So at WRC, we have got the truck fill station is operating and built. There was still some outstanding invoices that the administration at WRC has negotiated down in cost. So that's still, at the end of the day, the project was short $49,367.42. I discussed it at the board meetings that there's a possibility that I could take it back to the county and we could offer some sort of loan for it. So here we are. The truck fill station is owned by WRC. There was a grant for half of the cost motion made from Wheatland County through Ag Service Board to pay for half of the cost. It does provide a good service to the residents. It's slowly being built up, a customer base. There's hope there that there will be enough revenue to cover payment costs and things, which is what I'd suggested at the board meeting, was we could use the revenue from that to pay for any kind of loan.
Well, just a question through the chair, Scott. Well, my question is, what's the length? I mean, do you figure it'll be paid off in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years through the income off of that station? Or what's the income? What's the projected income?
I would assume that if we could, I'd recommend the loan be like a 5-year loan, because if any, like, we have no idea what kind of revenue this will, we have no clue at all. So if after the end of the first year, then we can sit down and figure out, well, we still got, so we can, well, I think a 5-year loan gives us enough time to try to figure out how this is, what kind of revenue we're going to get in here. They have, whole construction process has kept this thing apart from WRC, so it should be very easy to track.
And we've kept it separate but for budgeting in the future. It has its own separate allocations for it and everything, so we're keeping track of revenue and expenditures. And like Tom said, it is a new setup, so there is other options out there after 5 years if we have to do something. But my hope is that it's making money for sure.
Any other questions or discussion?
I know we've done this for seed cleaning plants and the whatnot, and this is kind of a joint venture between us and a corporation that we are part of. So I realize that we weren't directly responsible for the cost overruns, but they're there. They have been negotiated down.
Well, I'll put a motion on the floor to follow through with this and put a 5-year cap on it for review.
CAO Henderson, can you just outline, I know there's a process we need to follow. We just did it, I think, because our seed plan, Turmeric Road Library Board would be the 2 latest examples I recall. CAO Henderson, can you just remind us of the process for this?
Yes, through the chair. So what would happen is that council is in agreement that they do want to proceed with this. We have to do first reading of a lending bylaw for that amount, for the 49,000 and some. And then we do first readings, and we have to advertise for 2 weeks. And then there's just some rules that on opposition that we have to follow. And we haven't really encountered those rules. It's all outlined in section, I believe it's 265 of the MGA. I can pull up that section. And then we have to do second and third reading. So it is a little bit of a process. If everything goes okay, I think the loan could be finalized by the end of May. Just with like the readings of the bylaw. What I'd probably also suggest too, with that cap is if for some reason the WRC has not repaid that loan, what I would do is in that bylaw, just note the exact parameters, like such as, like credits will come off of like water or something like that, after like the 5-year mark, something along those lines. So like repayment is guaranteed and both parties agree to it. So that would be my only suggestion, but we could definitely kind of draft that up into the bylaw as well. So thank you.
Yep, no, I'll accept that as a friendly amendment to the process.
So just, I guess the motion could be to direct administration to start the process to draft a lending bylaw and bring it back for consideration. I'll support the motion. I will reiterate my concerns just around that these charges were not authorized by anybody and just sort of the governance concerns around that, but that's an aside. Any other questions or discussion?
I guess as a side note, that conditions, the 5 years, I think it would be cleaner and better if you just say we'll be renegotiated in 5 years. That's when you go to the bank or everything. That's what your term is. It doesn't how long it is or anything. It's just renegotiated in 5 years. So you have to sit down and hopefully it's paid by then. But if it's not, you'll see what the balance is. And then all the concerned parties can renegotiate the loan. I think that's probably the best terminology. That's what I'm used to anyway, and in my world.
Any other questions or discussion? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Perhaps a motion to accept the correspondence overall as information.
So moved.
Councillor Kester has moved. Any questions? Is any councillor opposed? Motion is carried. Is council's wishes to move into closed session or to break for lunch and come back to closed session after lunch? Okay, why don't we, are we okay if we just break till 12:45? Is that 12:30? Okay, we will reconvene at 12:32, Ben says. Thanks, everybody.
At 12:32, I will just phone into the other line then.
Sure, sounds good. We will probably, well, you know what? Well, I already recessed us.
You can move in camera now and reset.
Yeah.
No, because it'll be in camera for getting.
Well, I think you can still recess in camera, but I already had recessed us, so we'll come back. I will move us into closed session. But yeah, call into the closed line, Glenn. We'll have quorum to move into closed session at 12:30. Thank you.
Bye.
ECC. Sorry, I meant to tell everybody before you barged into another meeting.
The organizer has ended this Uber conference. Good
We'll call the meeting back to order. I'll move us in camera. Is any counselor opposed? Motion is carried. We're in closed session.
This call is being recorded.
I'll move us. Matt, are you ready? Sorry, I should have asked. You're good? Okay. I'm going to move us out of closed session. Is any counselor opposed? Motion is carried. There were no motions arising from closed session, and we've completed our agenda, so I will adjourn our meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Send that out. If I can separate it from my